Bloop.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so hands up who watched Aquaman 2 and the Lost
There was an
Kingdom?
Aquaman 2?
There was. So just real quick before we get started, and it's just not an actual review of it, but what were your general thoughts of it, Culture? What did you think of it?
Extraordinary waste of money, convoluted, very iffy CGI about 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Hollow story, terrible performance by Amber Heard. She couldn't summon emotions if she tried, even if she were practicing witchcraft. She was in too much of the film. Anybody who is not a fan of hers is going to be very unhappy with the movie. The actors performed at a surface level, getting the job done, but not actually
Loving the
doing much
fucking
more.
warp puns, mate.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Well, sorry, it takes a lot to weave all those in. But no, honestly, look, it was all just a terrible WEF wet dream. I mean, you're drowning
Yeah.
in the soy tears the entire time, and so did the box office with this thing. So, I again, this thing is this is an average movie at best. I actually rated it lower than Wonka, and I didn't have a lot of praise for Wonka. But I mean, compared to some of the other things that we've been served, this is just more DC garbledy.
Yeah, so I mean, my thoughts mirror yours. To be fair, it was. I mean, the climate change being the villain was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was derivative propaganda, I guess would be the best way to title it. It was just garbage, pretty soulless, not fun. Yeah, I was pretty bored through it as well. I didn't enjoy it very much at all. I watched 2 movies that day, and yeah, both were dog shit. So I didn't really have a good time. I'm not gonna lie, but hey, seems like everyone else is thinking the same thing as we were, because Aquaman 2 absolutely bombed. The Color Purple released Christmas Day to $18 million domestically, which is for a musical is pretty bloody insane. Now, Aquaman 2 really did bomb because it only did $38.3 million, which is substantially worse than the Marvels, which is quite funny. But also, what I like to think of when I do this is that this is the year 2 sequels to 2 separate billion-dollar movies have absolutely bombed.
Well, more than that if you count Indiana Jones with inflation.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely bombed epically. Aquaman 2 should lose somewhere in the region of $275 million to $300 million, all considered, because it opened up and it did. Oh, what did it do? So, where is it? We've got it. So it did quite a lot of theaters, 3,700 theaters.
4 days and $38.3 million. That means it didn't even average $10 million a day.
Yep. B cinema score.
Ooh.
Worldwide, it took $80.1 million. However, $30 million of that came from China.
China loved the first one too, and I don't think Warner's going to see a lot of that money. In fact,
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Tell you, like, generally they get anywhere from 30 to 9 times out of 10 less than 10 cents on the dollar is what we've heard, if they're lucky.
Yeah,
because then China will go, what money?
Yeah.
We don't see any money.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing. People think that, people think that it's a guarantee that they're going to get money from them. No, 100% no, 100% not. So they get basically no money from China, so you can discount a lot of that $30 million. So yeah, it's done what, 100, 110, 120 odd million dollars worldwide opening weekend. It should be doing that just domestically. Now, if it's going to follow standard superhero trajectory, it will drop off 60% next week. It's done, dead as a dodo, gone.
It also didn't necessarily have as many theaters as you would have expected for a major superhero release.
Mm.
You know, I think you would normally anticipate, well over 4,000 theaters that it opened in.
Yeah, there really wasn't many. I mean, 3,700, isn't it? And that's terrible. That's
Yeah, I mean, I think Wonka actually had more theaters than right now. It's pretty wild. And look, the Tom was like leading to something in his commentary, and that is that the earnings per theater for this film were very disappointing domestically as well.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it going, okay, you're barely competing with like a middling Illumination offering. A second.
Well, some of these theaters are at like -6 people. I mean,
they're paying people to come in and
yeah, no, sorry, joke, but
but no, it's pretty wild. I mean, Migration is a middling offering from Illumination, right? And
well, that was when I was warning people about has a heavy ESG message in it too. Because remember, we even heard, and I heard through the grapevine, and we even had basically people like Bob Iger confirm they were going to start leaning into the E part of the ESG. And that Aquaman is a clear example of that. This Migration movie is built on the idea of global warming. But yeah, no, they're instead of the S and G part of it, they're going to start leaning a lot more into the environmental. And this is where I said, look, the environmental thing I don't have as much problem with, because we can get some fun movies out of that. Remember, like Armageddon and Deep Impact and The Day After Tomorrow and 2012 and those kind of movies. Like those kind of movies come out of the idea of this, Earth's dying disaster shit. I can deal with that compared to the woke crap. I'm used to that.
Well,
but
the environmental stuff, it doesn't work because it's too heavy-handed. Their approach
it depends on how it's handled. Exactly, I agree with you there.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we're in for it as far as films for the better part of the next 2 to 3 years before they just give up on, the idea that they can force social change through this terrible approach to entertainment. A lot of people, a lot of people suggest, Tom, and I think you'll probably agree that the only reason they were doing this is because they thought that they could sustain it long enough that they would get a couple of generations invested in their trash, and that just didn't happen. And it's there. You have too many parts of the audience turning on all this messaging.
Well, we're almost 10 years into this crap.
Yeah,
and I've said this before. Like Hollywood runs on roughly about a decade of like a what do you call it, a
fad?
I think kind of, that's not the word I'm looking for, but every like 10 years to a decade or so, things change, right? Cycle. Thank you. Pretty much
the menstrual cycle that is
Hollywood.
The
menstrual cycle that is Hollywood. And it really, you pick up after the moguls and from the 60s on through now, there's been this kind of like cycle we go through. The difference is in this woke cycle, there was a gatekeeping involved. And I brought this up before, where they did not allow any of the independent voices to find their way into movies outside of independent voices from outside the US, it seems like. And none of these directors have done jack shit all since then, right? Like, do you guys remember who the director of Parasite was? I don't. Do you know what his new movie was? I don't. Do you remember what Deborah Chow's last hit was? I don't. Exactly that. Like, I mean, none of these people are worth a shit anymore. And we're at this point where everything's kind of hit this road of, I think the other studios, what I'm getting to, are going to start switching gears. Even if they lean into the environmental thing, they're going to definitely lean away from the woke crap. Disney is the only one that is committed to it right now. Amazon, sort of, kind of, and yes, it's in the other studios still. But as I've pointed this out with like Zaslav, right? Like David Zaslav knows that there are guys that like to suck dick out there, so he's going to make entertainment for guys who like to suck dick. Okay, that's just the way it is, right? People who have money to spend. But what he understands compared to some other people is that the audience for something like that is not nearly as big is something like Batman. So trying to make something like Batman for an audience like that makes a mistake. I didn't like the
Mm,
Batman, but one thing I can't say about the movie other than the BLM movement part is it wasn't overly, inundated with a bunch of messaging outside of that crap. Right? Like that's the biggest
yeah.
message that was hovering over the film. But once they start moving out of that kind of stuff, which they kind of have this year, I mean, we're kind of hard pressed to find a movie that was super woke. Even Barbie was up for debate on certain aspects of it. It didn't, to me, the movie doesn't go woke until about halfway through, right? Then it starts going down this woke path. Prior to that, the movie's exactly what it should be, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. It was a big hit. I can't speak on that. But then again, I've also pointed out like things like, the movie that was big this weekend that took everybody by surprise, except for me, kind of. I think you go back to last week when I was talking about it, either here on Midnight's Edge, Color Purple. I said that's kind of a wild card. It might do well because
Yeah.
these musical reboots tend to do very well. We were talking about it before the show. And why? Because it's something the audience likes. You have an audience for that. It may not be us, it may not be me and Culture
Mm,
and Mr. H, but guess what? It does have an audience. And they went out to see it
mm.
on Christmas Day, almost $20 million worth of it. But
And you know
there you
what?
go.
That it is surprising. I mean, to me, I said it before we got streaming today. That there's that many people that are invested in it. But is Tom is correct in saying, I mean, there is an audience out there for it. You have niches, you can appeal to niches, you just can't
Mm.
spend $250 million appealing to a niche. Doesn't work.
Well, this is, I mean, yeah, speaking about niches, though, I mean, even the Hollywood Reporter's like, look, one's movie lends further credence to the superhero fatigue theory. Aquaman 2's opening trails the recent 46.1 million start of the box office debacle, the Marvels from rival Marvel Studios. Now, listen, I don't necessarily think superhero fatigue is there, right? I think bad movie fatigue is the predominant purveyor of bad box office receipts. But I definitely think that there's an eye roll moment here and there when another superhero movie is announced in the same year consistently, time and time again. But I think what's most telling about this is Hollywood Reporter's statements. Box office debacle of Marvel Studios. You know, James Wan's superhero fatigue for Aquaman 2. There does seem to be a turning of the sort of tide with respect to mainstream media turning on DC and Marvel, whereas before, because that was their money maker, right, reporting on a lot of these things, getting a lot of clicks coming through and things. They're sort of turning their back on them. I don't know whether you guys sort of picked up on any of that, but definitely for me there.